We all love a good challenging boss fight, but every so often developers fail to see the line that separates challenging from downright broken. And those fights are more annoying and infuriating than they are fun. So in this feature, we'll be talking about a few such boss fights. The General, KAISER Knuckle. The end of KAISER Knuckle's campaign sees players coming up against the General in what proves to be one of the cheapest and most frustratingly tough bosses you'll ever face in a fighting game. Thanks to ridiculously unfair teleportation moves, slide kicks that he just won't stop spamming, and various attacks that can do devastating damage, the General is an absolute nightmare. Branch D, Final Boss, Drakengard 3. Drakengard 3, like most of the games made by Yoko Taro, is a pretty weird game, but having the final boss encounter essentially be a timing-based rhythm game is perhaps a bit too weird. What's even worse is that getting the timing right here is infuriatingly hard, and there's no shortage of people who have simply given up the game when they got to this part. Mike Tyson Punch-Out. Mike Tyson's appearance as the final boss in Punch-Out has gained plenty of notoriety over the years, and for good reason. Because right off the bat, Iron Mike comes at you with everything he's got. From a barrage of quick attacks that require very, very precise timing to dodge, to hard-hitting strikes that can knock the wind out of you immediately. It's a sudden and massive difficulty spike, and unless you've got a lot of skill and patience, you probably won't be able to beat it. BARRETT, Deus Ex, Human Revolution. Deus Ex Human Revolution's boss fights were one of its most maligned aspects when it first launched, and though they were significantly improved in the Director's Cut release, the fight against Barrett in the original game still needs to be mentioned here. If you'd been playing the game with a stealth, non-lethal build up to that point, you'd be pretty much screwed. The boss fight against Barrett completely forgets that the entire game is built around letting players play and progress however they want, and it instead forces players into a boss fight that caters very specifically to lethal builds. Shao Kahn, Mortal Kombat 2. Mortal Kombat fans are all too familiar with the big bad Shao Kahn showing up as the final boss, but of all his legendary appearances in the franchise, the one that defines him to this day is his insanely tough final fight in Mortal Kombat 2. Shao Kahn was an absolute monster with his attacks in the game, demanding players to have ultimate mastery over their skills and reflexes. It cranked the difficulty up to insane, unrealistic levels. CTHUN, World of Warcraft. CTHUN was nerfed to oblivion long ago by Blizzard, but all World of Warcraft players remember to this day what a monstrosity this boss fight was back in the day. An ocean of health, multiple deadly attacks, multiple phases of the fight. CTHUN would literally require hours and hours of investment, and multiple groups of players would have to work together to take it down. More than anything else, it was a test of patience. GALACTUS, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. GALACTUS checks most boxes you'd expect a nightmarishly tough boss fight would check. He's absolutely massive. He has attacks that can instantly take you out. He's got minions fighting for him that you have to contend with as well. He's got those frustrating and incessant laser attacks, and so much more. Living Ice, Lost Odyssey. There's a good chance that you may not have had issues with Living Ice in Lost Odyssey, but for a large section of the game's player base, this boss was a problem. That's because the fight essentially forces you to use a couple characters in your party against the boss. These characters aren't exactly the best, and if you hadn't been using them much, and many people hadn't, you'd be stuck with two ridiculously underleveled fighters against a strong opponent. Silver the Hedgehog, Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. All of Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 is basically a dumpster fire, but even though it's as hard as it is to look for positives in this game, the boss fight against Silver is especially atrocious. It is broken and doesn't even work as intended half the time, while you also have to contend with the weird camera that also becomes a hurdle. At the same time, Silver also has grabbing moves that he incessantly spams without taking a break, and that gets annoying real fast. Bed of Chaos, Dark Souls. No boss suffers the kind of widespread infamy among the Soulsborne fanbase as Bed of Chaos, which is often regarded as one of the worst and most frustrating bosses in the series. Each phase of the fight presents new challenges, with the boss refusing to let up no matter how much damage you do, while a number of the boss's own attacks range from maddeningly overpowered to brutally unforgiving. The long distance between the fight and the closest bonfire does it no favors either, because you will die a lot, and each time you'll have to traverse some distance and go through multiple other enemies in order to get back. AZAZEL, Tekken 6. Many a Tekken 6 player have come up short against this behemoth. AZAZEL is an absolute monstrosity who takes up about half of the screen, so you immediately know he is not kidding around. And his attacks are just as intimidating as he is, doing massive damage and not always being the easiest to dodge. AZAZEL also gets frame priority, so that's another major knock against you right from the get-go. GILL, Street Fighter 3. Street Fighter as a series has always been notorious with making players come up against some truly challenging final bosses, but perhaps the most maddeningly difficult of them all is Street Fighter 3's fight against GILL. He's a character who isn't just challenging, he has unfair advantages. He can resurrect himself, he can attack you with supers that will one-shot you, and his arsenal of regular attacks is nothing to scoff at either. SETH, Street Fighter 4. SETH is yet another infamously hard boss fight from the Street Fighter series, and he too can sometimes feel a bit too overpowered, and unfairly so. SETH is fond of using his feet in combat, but he uses them with such fierceness and ferocity, it's hard to keep up with it. You do eventually begin seeing a pattern, but the first few attempts are jarringly challenging. And that wraps it up. If you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing to our channel. We upload new videos daily. Also, don't forget to switch on the bell notification icon, that way you don't miss out on any of our videos.